Chapter 285-2, A Box of Makeup. On this night, Chen Ping'an finished drawing his second sword edict talisman. However, he still wasn't very satisfied. Just like pottery molding and pottery firing, those who were skilled in the trade could immediately identify the differences between two pieces of work, even if they looked identical to the uninitiated. Perhaps he genuinely needed to look for the ruins of an ancient battlefield and seek out those heroic spirits to fight against. Perhaps this was the only way to perfect his fourth-tier martial arts cultivation base. And this would then allow him to easily draw and master talismans, such as the Sword Edict Talisman. Chen Ping'an furrowed his brows and fell into deep thought. However, he suddenly turned around, only to see Lu Tai walking down the stairs before stopping and knocking on the wall as if he were knocking on a door. Lu Tai then smiled and sat down on the steps, not continuing down to the first floor. Chen Ping'an was just about to pick up the mountain and sea chronicle to cover up and hide the Sword Edict Talisman, yet Lu Tai couldn't help but chuckle and say, "What is there to hide? It's nothing more than an ancient talisman that's been lost to the world." The grade of the talisman isn't high either, and its only advantage is the fact that it's returned to a state of pure and natural simplicity. I accidentally caught a glance of the talisman just then, and it caused my heart to ache with pain. In fact, it still aches right now. "Why is that?" Chen Ping'an asked. Lu Tai pointed at the Sword Edict Talisman on the table and explained, "This defensive talisman is quite old. Even among the entire Lu clan, perhaps no one else around the same age as me can recognize it anymore. My heart is aching because number one, you're a pure martial artist, so the absolutely appalling manner in which you've butchered that ancient and pure talisman is truly shameful." Chen Ping'an couldn't help but interject and say, "Isn't martial artists drawing talismans unreasonable in the first place?" Lu Tai pursed his lips and replied, "Oh, is that so? Then by the looks of it, the records in the Lu clan's scripture library are incorrect, or perhaps my knowledge is insufficient." However, Lu Tai didn't want to delve into this topic either, so he continued, "Number two, you mostly rely on that brush when you're drawing talismans. In other words, it's not as if you have deep knowledge or skills in the art of drawing talismans. Maybe the destination that you want to reach is correct, but your path to this correct destination is full of wobbly twists and turns. As a result, the talismans that you draw are usable, but just barely. Number three, you're using good quality talisman paper, yet you're using it in a manner that's extremely crude and straightforward. This is an absolute waste of good material. In this sense, your manner of drawing talismans can't even be referred to as heretical. I should rather call it crooked and sinister. If skilled masters from the talismanic branch of the Taoist sect see you drawing talismans, they'll most likely feel a strong urge to smash you to death with a single punch." Chen Ping'an's brows were knitted into a deep frown. He carefully ruminated Lu Tai's words, first determining whether Lu Tai's remarks were true or false. Afterward, he determined whether they were useful or not useful. However, Lu Tai was far too mysterious, so it was very difficult for Chen Ping'an to reach a conclusion. Lu Tai smiled and asked, "Can you grab that talisman and allow me to carefully examine the quality of the talisman paper? I was only able to catch a fleeting glance of it just then, so I don't dare to confirm my analysis." Chen Ping'an hesitated briefly before eventually deciding to pinch the Sword Edict Talisman between his fingers and hold it up for Lu Tai to see its backside. Lu Tai smiled faintly and paid no heed to Chen Ping'an's excessive caution. He examined the talisman paper for a moment before nodding and saying, "Sure enough, this is the returning to spring talisman paper, a very precious type of talisman paper. After drawing a talisman on such talisman paper, one can use the talisman repeatedly. When it comes to the quality and strength of a successfully drawn talisman, the quality of the talisman paper also plays a very important role. Apart from those talismans that seek to maximize strength and destructive power, most genuinely good talismans in the world can be repeatedly used. But what about you? According to the humorous remark of a grand elder from the talismanic branch, this is called fading youth in the mirror and falling flowers from a tree. 1. To put it simply, these are things that can't be held eternal. Tell me, Chen Ping'an, do you find this a shame? Talisman paper, especially returning to spring talisman paper, is especially good at burning through one's money. Ah, You can say that my heart is aching for you right now. Anyway, you're a wealthy person with a wealthy business, so you don't need to care about this measly amount of money. Chen Ping'an glanced at Lu Tai before glancing at the sword edict talisman that he had put back on the table. Lu Tai was slightly curious, so he rested his cheeks in his hands and gazed at the young boy who had a slightly regretful expression on his face as he sat by the table. Lu Tai smiled and asked, "Did the person who gave you these precious talisman papers not tell you about this before? Did the person who taught you how to draw talismans not tell you, a half-assed talisman cultivator, to be as sparing as you can?" Chen Ping'an heaved a heavy sigh. Lu Tai was slightly amused by Chen Ping'an's misfortune, and he gloated, "Pure martial artists at the 7th, 8th, and 9th tier can most likely create very decent talismans. They can rely on a single breath of true qi and draw a talisman in a single go. However, it's a pity that martial artists who have climbed up one step at a time and reached the pinnacle of the mountain already possess wills as powerful as iron. That being the case, who will run away to draw talismans? It's because you're fortunate enough to possess such precious talisman paper and such a good calligraphy brush that you're able to draw decent talismans. Otherwise, each talisman you draw will be equivalent to burning a huge stack of money. Your situation is slightly better, and you're only burning half a stack of money." Chen Ping'an shot a vicious glare at the beautiful young man, pouring salt on his wounds. Lu Tai chuckled and continued, "Chen Ping'an, you're truly a very interesting person. You're a martial artist drawing talismans, and you even have a sword nurturing gourd and flying swords. The most insane thing is that you're even reading studiously every single night. Are you not afraid of dereliction of your actual duties and detrimentally affecting your martial arts cultivation? Are you not afraid of losing a clear identity and losing the ability to achieve anything?" Chen Ping'an didn't pay any attention to Lu Tai's thinly veiled insults. He put away the sword edict talisman and started to flip through the mountain and sea chronicle. Lu Tai quietly stood up and returned to the 3rd floor. Afterward, Lu Tai started to leave the lingering shade mountain pagoda from time to time, either rowing a small boat to enjoy the scenery around Emerald Lake or visiting the treasure chambers that apparently every single treasure-swallowing whale possessed. In fact, treasure-swallowing whales were named as such because during their long lives, they would swallow those large ships that had encountered accidents and sunk to the bottom of the sea. Moreover, large ships that had the ability to traverse between continents were often worthy of being labeled treasure ships. Thus, a mature treasure-swallowing whale would definitely have all kinds of strange and peculiar items in its stomach. There would definitely be countless rare and unique treasures. In fact, there might even be the golden bodies of immortals left behind after they passed away. One afternoon, Lu Tai started to retrieve a set of tea instruments from his pocket treasure. There were so many items that it almost seemed cumbersome. Afterward, he used a secret technique to extract the essence of spring water from Emerald Lake, using this essence to leisurely brew tea in the corridor outside the 1st floor. The fragrance of this tea was especially pleasant. Chen Ping'an didn't go over to ask for a cup of tea. Instead, he simply practiced sword techniques inside the pagoda. Afterward, Lu Tai started to brew tea every day, enjoying the scenery as he sipped tea by himself. He would often sit there for entire afternoons at a time. Just before noon one day, Chen Ping'an was almost about to finish practicing walking meditation. At this moment, he saw Lu Tai rowing a small boat and returning from the distance. After mooring the small boat, Lu Tai jumped onto the corridor and stood still. As Chen Ping'an walked past him while performing walking meditation, Lu Tai raised his hands high and revealed the boxes of makeup stacked in his hands. He was most likely showing off his bountiful yield for today. Not far from the platform in the middle of Emerald Lake, there were several pagodas that were shops run by the intercontinental ship. These were places that could quickly drain one of their wealth. Chen Ping'an only visited a single time, and he came to the conclusion that things were far too overpriced. Picking a few comparable items to look at, he discovered that things were even more exorbitantly expensive than the shops in Stalactite Mountain. Realizing this, Chen Ping'an lost all interest in purchasing things from these shops. With a tap of his feet, Lu Tai lightly jumped back and sat down on the white jade railings of the corridor. He then opened a box of makeup and took out a small copper mirror. He started to purse his lips, even extending a bent finger afterward and running its tip against his long eyebrows. His movements were delicate and refined. Chen Ping'an continued to make his way down the corridor as he practiced fist techniques, never shifting his gaze from the beginning to the end. When Chen Ping'an walked past Lu Tai a second time, the beautiful young man, carefully drawing his eyebrows, subtly moved his small copper mirror aside and asked with a smile, "Does it look good?" Chen Ping'an didn't look at Lu Tai, applying makeup to his face, or offer a response. Afterward, Lu Tai asked a different question each time Chen Ping'an walked past him. "Chen Ping'an, do you think this blusher is a bit too bright? Should I draw my eyebrows a bit more slender?" Sure enough, using the thin hairpin from the Flower Dew shop to scoop makeup from the box will result in a more balanced and natural consistency. What do you think? Chen Ping'an ignored him and continued to silently practice walking meditation. He followed his original plan and practiced all the way until noon. The last time Chen Ping'an walked past Lu Tai, the latter didn't ask him any questions. Rather, Lu Tai placed the small copper mirror, hairpin, as well as several boxes of makeup on the railing beside him. He turned around to gaze at the large patch of lotus leaves, with his makeup exquisite and his eyes intoxicated. Chen Ping'an was just about to make his way to the entrance of the first floor. However, without retracting his gaze, Lu Tai asked again, "Do you think that a man like me is very laughable? In fact, you even feel a sense of disgust deep down in your heart." Chen Ping'an stopped before turning around to walk toward Lu Tai. When he arrived 5 to 6 paces away from Lu Tai, he also sat down on the railing with his face looking at the lake and his back facing the corridor. Lu Tai wasn't frustrated by Chen Ping'an's refusal to reply. He smiled beautifully to himself and picked up a box of makeup. He felt like its contents were quite poor, and it was unable to live up to its name. He decided not to use this box of makeup in the future. Thus, he casually tossed it into Emerald Lake. "How much did that box of makeup cost?" Chen Ping'an suddenly asked. Lu Tai faltered for a moment before also shifting his position such that he was facing the lake. He smiled and replied, "It wasn't too expensive. Each box only cost a single lesser heat coin. It just came out this year, and it's already very famous. Quite a number of renowned celestial maidens from Middle-earth Divine Continent like to use it." "Ah, it was most likely a trick played by those scummy merchants. I was tricked by the group of them." Chen Ping'an sighed with emotion and said, "One lesser heat coin is equivalent to 100 snowflake coins, which is equivalent to 100,000 taels of silver. I feel like." He paused for a moment, and a gentle breeze brushed past his face as he continued, "Even 1,000 taels of gold might not be enough to purchase happiness. Perhaps the box of makeup wasn't expensive to you. However, some people will definitely be dumbfounded when they hear the price. Moreover, they'll refuse to believe that such exquisite makeup can exist in the world." Lu Tai was slightly puzzled. After falling silent for a short while, the young boy wearing a snow-white robe placed his hands on his knees and told Lu Tai the story about the feminine man from his hometown. Chen Ping'an didn't recount the story in a solemn manner, and his tone and expression weren't solemn either. He calmly described the tragic life of the deceased person to the young man beside him. This was a young man who had a colorful ribbon tied around his waist. This was a young man with an exuberant expression. He was an esteemed immortal, and he was more breathtakingly beautiful than real women. Meanwhile, that man from his hometown had only been slightly skinnier. In fact, he even had a stubble. He was no more beautiful than the woman in the markets. Even though he tidied up his appearance every morning, his fingernails would still be filled with clay when it was time to finish work and go home. Because of this, he wouldn't appear attractive at all when he made orchid-shaped fingers. Moreover, he was completely clueless about flying iridescent makeup, peach blossom makeup too, and so on. He didn't understand how to apply lipstick, put on blusher, draw eyebrows, among many other things either. In the end, Chen Ping'an looked into the distance and said in a slightly sad voice, "After everything that happened, I still feel like he was a very strange person. He was clearly a man, so why did he like to dress up like a woman? However, he asked me for something on the day he hid himself under the blankets and stabbed himself to death with a piece of porcelain. I didn't agree, and I still feel deep regret to this very day. If I knew what he would do, I would have definitely agreed to his request. He talked about many things with me on that day, and he eventually smiled and said that he planned to not act like a woman anymore. Because of this, he asked me to help look after that box of makeup for him, lest he couldn't control himself again. However, I naturally wouldn't agree to such a request at the time. I wouldn't agree no matter what. He tried to persuade me 2 times before giving up. After he died, no one saw where that box of makeup went. In fact, no one cared about it either. Chen Ping'an turned around and smiled as he looked at the stunningly beautiful Lu Tai, asking, "Why did you throw such an expensive box of makeup away?" Lu Tai cocked his head, causing his exquisite pearl hairpin to turn on an angle as well. He smiled faintly and replied, "Perhaps I should have given it to you then. When you return home in the future, you can take the box of makeup to that person's grave and tell him that such exquisite makeup does indeed exist in the world. You can tell him to reincarnate into a better body in the next life and become a girl who can apply as much makeup as she wants. She can apply kilograms at a time if she wants, and she won't need to worry about money either." Chen Ping'an turned back around and gazed into the distance. He gently shook his head and replied, "I can't even find his grave, so how can I show him this? How can I tell him these things?" The cleanly dressed young boy in white wrapped his hands behind his head, not saying anything else. 1. This is a line from Wang Gui's poem, Butterflies Lingering Over Flowers. 2. These refer to styles of makeup in ancient China. Flying iridescent makeup refers to Fei Zia Zhuang, and peach blossom makeup refers to Tao Hua Zhuang.